who is US based and has trained over 60,000 professionals. So this is the rich experience because every training add value to your training. So with the question you received from the audience, you got to know what the participant need. So his experience is spread over 20 years, and which include Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Merck, General Mills, and so on. And from the accountant side is Institute of Management Accountants. So other than Excel, he has 25 years of experience, industrial experience, and he has practical experience of using Excel also. The overall training would be over around 15 hours. So this is just an orientation session so that you could understand how this training will be different from other Excel training you have already attended. So the topics would be, you will get topics, but I will go through those. That's Excel efficiency. Then we have advanced static techniques, spark lines, text manipulations, flash fill, then statistics. It will be going about statistics for non-statisticians. So I'm sure that our members will be greatly benefited with this online training. And with this, I think it's time for Dr. Isaac, but I'll hand over to Shams if he has to add anything else. Otherwise, we can go to our training directly.
Thank you very much, sir. You also taken the part. We welcome Isaac Gottlieb on our board, and let's begin our today's session. Thank you very much, sir, for your time and your presence. Over to you.
Okay. Good evening. It's good morning for me. I'm in Queens, New York. I am starting with the sheet called autofill and part 1. You may be familiar with many of the things, you may not. I'm going to assume that nobody knows Excel, but with time you'll see that I'm not moving slow. I'm starting with a sheet called autofill. And as you notice here, I have two numbers, 6 and 9. If I select the two of them and I get here to the corner and drag it down, Excel knows how to continue. This is called the autofill feature of Excel. If you notice, it was 6, 9, and then it continued by itself to 12, 15, 18, and so on and so forth. What happens, Excel is performing a linear regression that many people are familiar with, but they don't know that Excel is using linear regression. And later on, when I go to the statistics, you'll see that I can use it to do all kinds of regressions without really using formulas. Anyhow, once you establish a column on the left or on the right, you can select the next two numbers to use the autofill. And this time it's going to go backwards by 3. If you notice, I am not going to drag anymore. When I get to the corner here, I just double click. And Excel knows how to continue by itself. So instead of dragging, I'm using the double click. Now, the next column has Monday, Wednesday, which are not numbers, and Excel knows how to continue Monday, Wednesday, and so on and so forth. If you double click, it's going to continue. How does Excel know to use days instead of numbers? What I want to show you is where Excel is drawing these autofill for items that are not numbers. I'm going to go to File, Options, File, Options, and go to Advanced. And when I drag the scroll bar all the way down to the end, I have the Edit Custom Lists. These are all the lists. I have an American operating system, so these are all the lists that are going to behave instead of numbers as text, and you can add your own all kinds of your custom lists by yourself. So I don't have to do one column at a time. I can do a few of them. I'm not sure if your operating system is going to recognize first quarter, second quarter. In my case, it does, and it doesn't go to the fifth quarter. So you notice in column F, I have first quarter, second quarter, and then when it gets to the fourth quarter, it goes to first quarter, second quarter. I'm not sure what your operating system has. Now in column H, I changed the dates, and you may have the dates a little bit different. So I have November 22nd, 2019. If you don't mind, put here November 18, 2018. So you have two dates with a difference of 1 week. Now, dates in Excel are not dates. Dates in Excel are numbers formatted as dates. So if I click on this cell, which is November 22nd, 2019, and I change it to a number by clicking on the comma style, you'll discover that November 11, 2019 is 43,791 days since January 1st, 1900. All dates in Excel are relevant to January 1st, 1900. So if you subtract two different dates, you're going to get the number of days between them. I'll show you a couple of things about it in a second. So I'm going to click on this cell, go to my format painter to pick up the format and paint this date. Now that 1 week apart, if you select the two of them, and you should have November 22nd, 2019, November 18, 2019. Actually, I should change it to 7 days later, which is going to be November 29. So this is 1 week apart. If I'm selecting the two of them and double click or drag, it's going to make it every week, and so on and so forth. I will talk about the autofill in dates in one more second. I will go below the set here. I sent you, and you have in your files, sheet with all the shortcuts. I'm going to use the first shortcut now, which is Control semicolon. Control semicolon is today's date. Control semicolon is today's date. And today, April 12, 2021, if I change it to a number, is 44,298 days since January 1st, 1900. So this is about dates. And the same thing about time. I'm going to use another shortcut, Control Shift semicolon, Control Shift semicolon. I think by you it's going to be 6:18 p.m. By me it's 9:18 a.m. And then time in Excel is not time, it's just a number formatted as time. So if I'm going to change it to a number, for me it's 0.39 of a day. So if you have problems understanding dates or time, change it to a number, and then you know what's going on. I will deal with the autofill of dates in one more second. The last two items that I have here, I typed 0.5, 1.25. I selected the two of them and I used another shortcut, Control 1. Control 1 is format cells. And if you notice, I formatted it to look like a fraction. Control 1 is format cell. And if you see, I have 0.5, 1.25, and if I double click, it's going to continue every 0.75, every 0.75 using my format. And the last thing I want to talk about in autofill is use dates. I'm going to use Control semicolon to get today's date. Control semicolon to get today's date. And then you'll discover that when you drag it down, it's going to say April 12, April 13, April 21, April 14, and so on and so forth. When you stop, you'll discover that Excel has a small little menu here, which most people don't know that it exists. And then you can select all kinds of options. For example, fill weekdays without the weekend, or fill years, or fill month. I'm going to double click for the autofill. Any questions about the autofill before I go to the next sheet, which is not related to what I'm doing here? Any questions about the autofill? Okay. By the way, my name and my email is the same, so I'm going to just type here and say that my email is Isaac Gottlieb. You can always send me an Excel question anytime you have any Excel questions. Just use my email, isaacgottlieb@gmail. Okay, I am moving to the sheet called Selecting in Excel, and I want to show you how to select efficiently. It's basically the same data I have on the other sheet. If you want to select the range, just click anywhere in the range and use Control A. Control A is select all. Control A is select all. Now, the only thing you have to remember is Control Shift. So I'm going to show you why. If you want to select all the way down, you use Control Shift, arrow down. If you want to select to the left, Control Shift, left. If you want to select to the right, Control Shift, right. If you want to select up, Control Shift, up. And you can also click, Shift click, click, Shift click will select, click, Shift click will select. We will be using all these shortcuts soon, and I have them all written down here on the right and how to select. Any questions about selection? Okay. I am going to go to the sheet called Formulas and Addressing, and I'm going to calculate. I think that you have a different operating system, so you may not see the same things I'm seeing sometimes, so I'm going to use a different idea. What I want to do here is I want to calculate the salary for all these employees, and I'm going to do it in a pretty efficient way. I'm going to say equal. Most of you know how to do it. Click on this. Times, which is Shift 8, click on that. Most people hit enter. I don't hit enter. I use Control Enter. Why am I using Control Enter? Because if you use Control Enter, it stays in the same cell, and then you can double click and get the rest of them. So instead of using Enter, I use Control Enter. Anytime you're in a cell, you can either use F2 or double click, and then you color code where the information is coming from. You see C3, D3, blue times red. And if you go down here, it's going to be C4, D4. And if you go down here, it's going to be C5, D5. Basically, it's relative addressing. I'm going to go to formulas, show formulas, and then you're going to see that we have C3, D3, C4, D4, C10, D10, relative addressing. The problem starts if I want to multiply the data by a single cell. I'm going to say equal, click on this, times, click on that, and then when I drag it down, it's going to be E3, G1, E4, G2. G2 is empty, and I'm going to get a bunch of zeros. Look what happens. I'm going to get zeros because it goes to, let me show you, G2, G3, G4, G5, and basically that relative addressing is a problem. So I am going to use absolute addressing. The way I do it, I'm going to say equal this times that, and then I use the F4 button. F4 button makes it absolute addressing. It's going to be $G, $1, which is E3, G1, E4, G1, E10, G1, absolute addressing. So if you double click, you're going to see the absolute addressing. I'm going to show you. And if you want, you can type $G, $1, but F4 is the shortcut to make it absolutely addressed. And the last thing I'm going to do on this sheet is double click on the auto sum either here or on the home. I can double click here, and then I'm going to get the auto sum. I will increase the size. And of course, anytime you double click, it shows you where the information is coming from. If I get this worksheet from somebody and I don't remember or I don't know what they did, I can always use the following. I can go to, I am in cell F11, it says here in the name box F11, I can go to formulas and say trace precedence. What is feeding this cell? Click, 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 and it shows me what feeds my cell. I'm going to remove it. I can also trace dependence. What is this cell's feeding? I'm going to say click, 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 and it shows me what it's feeding. And if you have it set from a different sheet, it will show it as well. Any questions before I go to the next sheet?
Doc, if you could just open the chat box, there is a question regarding your previous sheet. And I would like to also request the participants, if they don't want to
I opened the chat and
will
I don't
be
see the question.
reviewing the questions and replying you accordingly. Thank you.
Can you read to me the question, because I don't. 1 second.
Yeah, it's regarding your previous sheet. There's one participant asked to repeat the date function autofill function, which you performed earlier.
This one, okay. So basically what I wanted to show, if you have an autofill in Excel, you can use control semicolon, and basically when you're going to drag it down, it's going to go day by day by day. In my case, it's April 12, 2021. I think you have a different operating system, so it's going to say December 12, the other way. But if you drag it down slowly, it allows you to go day by day by day by day. And then when you get to the end here, you can stop, and there is a small little menu that comes up and allows you to have all kinds of options. For example, fill weekdays, fill month. Okay, in my case, fill weekdays. It doesn't show Saturday and Sunday. You can try it by yourself. So you see, next Saturday and Sunday are missing from that. So the autofill function, the autofill menu, allows you to do the autofill with time, which is going to save you a lot of time if you want to create dates in Excel. I hope that answers your question. If anybody has a question, just turn on the mic and talk. I would like to hear it and answer on the spot. I am going to go to the sheet called naming. And what happens here, I am going to show how to name cells and ranges. So I am in cell H4, and in H4 I have the value 15%. Okay, and it's an H4 here. I go to the name box and I type the word tax, T-A-X, enter. What did I do? I just changed the name of the cell. From now on, I can use it anywhere in this workbook. Instead of using absolute addressing, I can go and say equal 500 times tax, and it knows. And I don't have to use H4 and do the absolute addressing. If you remember, we have here the word tax. The way I did it, I'm going to show it again. Click here, go to the name box, type the word tax, hit enter, and then you change it. I am going to go to the previous sheet, which is formulas and addressing. And I'm going to click here and use the tax that I have on that other sheet. I'm going to say equal, click on this, times tax. I don't know where tax is. Of course I do, but then you can just drag it to double click and it's going to use the tax that I have on the other sheet. So I can name a cell. I can also name a range. How do I name a range? I'm going to select, for example, these cells, and I'm going to type 22, control enter. Control enter enters the same information in all the cells. If I'm going to say my name, Isaac, control enter enters the same information in all the cells, 55, control enter. So the range that I just selected, which is G8 through J11, I can go to the name box and name the range, and I'm going to call it A, B, C, D, enter. So now instead of, if I have 10,000 numbers, I give it a name, and I can go anywhere in the workbook and say equal sum of A, B, C, D, and I don't have to select it. And you'll notice that I never close parentheses. Excel is going to close the parentheses for me. So double click, you see, I just said sum of A, B, C, D, and I don't have to select it. I prepared here another range a while ago. And what I did is I named the range. How? Use Control A, and you'll see that I named it sample. I typed SAMPLE up here. And this range is called sample. So I can go anywhere in this workbook and say equal, for example, average. I hit the tab to get the average of what? Sample. And I don't have to select the range, and it knows. So I can name a cell, I can name a range, and I can do all kinds of other things with it, but we'll see one step at a time. Now what I want to do is I want to name this range profit by the name up here, this name cost, this name sales, this name, this range Jan, this range April, and you can use it anything you want, but I'm not going to do manually. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select it. Control A is select all. Now I go to formulas and I say create from selection. And Excel is going to do or create all these names. It's going to ask me, do you want to name it by the top row and the left column? Because the text is there. I'm going to say okay. And then you'll discover that this is named profit, and this is named cost, and this is named March. Actually, now that you have all these names, you can use the drop-down menu as a go-to. Where is April? Here it is. Where is sample? Where is tax? Where is May? And it does it for me. So now I can go anywhere in this workbook and say equal sum of profit. And it knows. And I don't have to select it. And more than that, if my boss comes to me and says, what is the cost for April? I say equal. It's not case sensitive and the order is not important. And I say cost space April, and it will give me 19. So the space gives me the intersection. So if I say equal cost space April, I can get the value without going to select it. And it could be very useful from time to time. And the last thing is, sometimes you don't want to keep the structure the way it is, so you can go to formulas and use the name manager. The name manager allows you to change the range or delete it. So for example, cost is from C2 to C7. I'm going to change it to be to C9. Click on the check here. And then if you check to see, click on the drop-down menu and go to cost. And you'll see that I changed it. So the name allows me to use the information without going directly there, and it saves me a lot of time. And I never use absolute addressing. I always use naming. It's much easier. Any questions about the names? Okay. If you have any questions, you know my email address and you can always send it to me. Next, I'm going to the sheet, and here's an explanation on how to do things so you can look at it by yourself. So what I want to do now is I want to go to the sheet called Simple Chart and deal with charts for a little while. So if you want to create a chart from the range that I have here on the left, you don't have to select the range. All you have to do is click on a single cell in the range, and you can use a shortcut The shortcut is F11. F11 is an instant chart on a new sheet. F11 is instant chart on a new sheet. And you notice that the June, July, August, September is down here at the x-axis. The problem is if you go back to the sheet simple chart and look at the data that I have on the right here, it's identical data except instead of the time being June, July, August, September, I have 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And the problem with it, if you try to create a chart, you'll discover that the time on the leftmost column becomes part of your Y, of your values. I'm going to show you F11. So we have a problem that this is not at the x-axis as you expect it to be. So the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 becomes part of your data. And what you want to do is very simple, is a very simple solution. Of course, you can fix it, but the solution is delete the header. If you don't have a header on the leftmost column, if you create a chart, it's going to automatically create take the leftmost column and use it on your x-axis. Try F11. And you'll see that now it's at the bottom. And the solution, as you saw, was very simple. Just take off or don't have a header on the leftmost column. Okay, and this works for all charts, especially line charts and column charts. The only time it's going to use the leftmost column on your x-axis is if you have dates or text. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to create a chart from the first two columns only. Of course, I can select it manually, but to repeat the shortcut that I used before, I'm going to use Control Shift arrow down. It's a very short range, but just to repeat, the Control Shift arrow down is to select efficiently. And what I want to do is I want to create a chart only from the first two columns. This is why I selected them. To create a chart on the same sheet, I use another shortcut, Alt F1. Alt F1 is instant chart on the same sheet. And you notice now that if I selected the range, it just created it from the range, not from the entire area. And to remind you or to tell you about all Excel charts, first click selects all of them. Second click the individual column. So it's not double click, it's one. Let me do it again. First click all of them, second click the individual. Then I can do right click and change the color of the individual. If I do it for all of them, first click all of them, right click, then it's all of them. And again, first click, second click, it works for all Excel charts. Now I created this beautiful chart. I know it's ugly, but I'm just saying, if you create a very beautiful chart and the bookkeeper or accounting or anybody comes to you 2 weeks later and brings you the extra data that you see in columns C and D, how do you add it to the chart? To add the extra data to the chart, you just select the data, if it's adjacent to the original data, copy it, Control C, touch the chart and paste Control V, and you don't have to start from scratch. So basically all you do is copy and paste and it adds it there. For example, if I had now the next month, September, October, which is adjacent but going to extra row, and I had some numbers here, let's say 8 and 2, and if you want to have this additional month in the chart, all you have to do is select it, Control C, touch the chart, Control V, and you see that it added it here. So all you have to remember is copy and paste. I am going to go to the sheet called Add Data to Chart. And somebody created this chart, I didn't do it, from columns K and L. And then I want to add the data in column M, like Mary, to the chart. The way I'm going to do it is click on M1. I don't want to select the entire column, just the data. So I'm going to use Control Shift arrow down. I selected the range and copy it, Control C. Go back to the sheet, to the chart, and paste it, Control V, and we are in business. So remember, if you have adjacent data, don't start from scratch, just copy and paste, and it will add it to the chart. Okay, I am going to go to the sheet called Sparklines. By the way, if you notice, anything that I do here is not sophisticated so far. Anything that I do here is just to know where to click. It's pretty simple. I'm in the sheet called Sparklines. You know what I want to do is I want to create some micro charts, which are called Sparklines. So I'm going to go to the cell I3 and create a chart from this range. The way I'm going to do it, I'm going to go to Insert and go to the Sparklines area and use the first one, which is called Line. It says that I'm a cell I3, and I'm going to get the data from these cells. And when you say OK, you're going to get a small little micro chart. It's called Sparkline. You can have the high point, the low point, all the points, change the color, and play with it. So I get a micro chart, and if I want to move it to PowerPoint or Word or make a presentation, I'll show you in a second how to make it look good. Let me show you the other additional two more spark lines. So I'm going to go to Insert, Column, select all these values, say OK. I cannot double click, I have to drag, and I get the columns. I can make it a little bit wider, I can make it taller, and play with the formatting up here, which I'll let you do by yourself. And the last one is to have the win and loss, which is just going to point out when the values are negative. So the spark lines are micro chart in the cell. The question I usually get is when I copy the range into a different application, suddenly it changes the structure. It doesn't look the same. So the trick is very simple. You select the range. Of course, I could have used the other options. And instead of just copying, go to the drop-down menu next to the copy and say copy as picture. So when you copy as picture, and then you paste it, you get an identical picture to what you see, and then you can move it to PowerPoint or Excel. Okay, now I'm going to the last sheet on this book, workbook, and this is a little bit more entertaining. I'm using to compare apples and bananas. You can use it to compare apples and oranges. You can use it to compare the logo of Apple with the logo of Samsung. But once you understand the concept, you can do it for any other thing. So I'm going to create a three-dimensional column chart. I'm going to select the range. I could use Control A, but this is so short. And I'm going to insert a three-dimensional column chart. Insert three-dimensional column chart. It works for all charts, but this one is better to illustrate. And from some odd reason, what I do does not work when I do it on the same sheet. I know the answer, but I don't want to explain. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it to another sheet. I'm going to right-click here, move chart to a new sheet, chart 4. Okay. So remember, first click selects all of them. Second click the individual. You can right-click and change the color of the individual. And for all three-dimensional charts, you can right-click and say 3D rotation. It works for all three-dimensional charts, whether it's surface chart or pie chart or this one. And then you can just up and down, turn it left to right, and so on and so forth. The purpose of this exercise is to show you how to add the pictures to the chart. So the way I'm going to do it, I'm going to go to my apples and pick up the apple, Control C for copy, go to my chart, chart 4, first click, second click, and then I use Control V for paste. So now it's part of my column. And then I can go to my fill effects and go to fill and maybe stack it to scale. And I can do the same thing with my bananas. You can do it for almost any picture. Don't do it for every presentation, but from time to time, it's a good idea to do it. First click, second click, and then I can paste it. And again, with the fill effects, I can stack it. I have 2 more pictures there. I can grab the garden here, Control C, go to the chart, touch the wall, and paste. And grab the other picture of the bench, go to the chart, touch the floor. Doesn't let me do it. See, I can't touch the floor because Control C. Let me see. It doesn't let me touch the floor. So try to touch the floor because I have a problem here with interacting with Zoom. Touch the floor. Let me just see if I can do it a different way. I was able to do it. So touch the floor and paste, and you can do it. This is going to help to work only if it's in a different sheet. If it's on the same sheet, it's not going to work. Any questions before I go to the next file? Okay, I am going to go to part 2. I am on the sheet called part 2 and the workbook called part 2 and on the sheet called text. When I downloaded or received this text and I put it in my Excel file under text, it was all crammed into column A. And what I want to do is I want to separate it to the individual sheet, to the individual columns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on column A and look at the data. It's separated with a comma. I'm going to go to data, text to columns. Delimited means it's separated. I'm going to go next and say comma and finish. And basically it separated it into the individual columns. I'm going to go to the sheet called text again. This is data for 1,000 customers and it's all crammed into column A. And what I want to do is I want to separate it into the individual columns. What is the data separated with? It's separated with a dash. So I can click on column A and go to data, text to columns, next, other. Put a dash here and finish. And Excel knows to separate it into the individual columns. And then I can play with it and do things as much as I want. I'll go back to the sheet called text to show you a couple of things I can do with text. Sometimes you want the other way around. For example, you want to concatenate it and you want to say equal first name followed by last name. Now with numbers, you use a plus. With text, you use the ampersand sign, which is the end, and click on first name. So now it's going to be last name. First name followed by last name. Control Enter. Let me just do that. Double click. And they're all together. The problem is there's no space. So I can also do the space and say equal first name and quote, space, quote, and last name, Control Enter, and double click. And about 15 different text functions in Excel. You can say equal uppercase. And you can use lower, and you can use all kinds of things. You can, all you have to do is go function, text, function, text functions, and it's going to find it for you. One more thing I want to do about text, which is flash fill. Flash fill is in a way like artificial intelligence. It knows what I want to do and then it mimics me. For example, if I'm going to go to column E and I want to use the first initial for Mr. Ye or Mr. Bai, so I'm going to say Y space B for the last name. And then I want all the names to be like that. So I'm going to start the next one, which is going to be V, and Excel knows already what I want to do, and it's going to do the rest of it. For example, I can say that Yay makes 17.4 per hour. Once I did that, I can also say that Vincenzo, and it knows what I want to do, and it's going to copy the rest of them for me. So the flash fill follows me, looks at me like a parrot or like a monkey, and it sees what I do, and it continues for me. In case it doesn't work for you, and you can use a shortcut Control E for the flash fill, or you can go under Home, and in the Edit, there is a flash fill as well. But usually once you create the first row and go to the second row, it will know for you. Any questions about the flash fill? Okay. I am going to the sheet called if. And I know most people know how to use if. I'm just going to use it for a couple of times. The if function has 3 parts: question, answer if it's true, and answer if it's false. So I'm going to click here. And I'm going to use an if function. I don't know about Pakistan, but here, if people work more than 40 hours, they get 50% for the overtime. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use function. I'm going to go to logical if. So the if function has 3 parts: question, answer if it's true, and answer if it's false. So what's the question? Did I work less than or equal to 40 hours? If I did, answer if it's true, then what you pay me is this times that. That's simple. The problem is if I work overtime, what happens then? Then you pay me for the first 40 hours, you pay me the rate. Then you calculate the overtime, which is the number of hours, minus 40, times the rate, times 1.5. So if you notice, the if function has 3 parts: question, answer if it's true, and answer if it's false. I'm going to say okay, double click for the rest of the people, and I'm going to double click here or use F2 and show you that the if function, some people don't like to use the menu, has 3 parts: question, comma, answer if it's true, comma, and answer if it's false. Let me show one more example. If I have all these salespeople, and what I want to do is anybody who sold $10,000 or less is going to get 5% commission. Anything over 10%, they're going to get 7% commission. I'm going to use the same idea with the function, logical if. Okay, what's the question? The question is this less than or equal to 10,000. If it's true, what do I pay you? This times 5%. If it's false, that means you did sell more than the $10,000. So I can do 10,000 times 5% plus whatever you sold over 10,000, which in this case is going to be 2,450 times 7%. So again, the if function has three parts: question, answer if it's true, and answer if it's false. So any question about the if function before I move to the next part? Okay, next I'm going to go to part 3. Let me just stop sharing part 3. I am at the sheet called statistics. So I named the cells A1 to A500 to be data. The way I did it is I clicked on A1, selected it, Control Shift arrow down. Look at the name box. I used the word data, capital D, capital A, capital T, capital A. I just want to tell you that in this case, sometimes the names do have some kind of a meaning when it's upper or lower case, but it's not important at the moment. And basically what I want to know is I want to know the average of the 500 numbers, the highest of the 500 numbers, and so on and so forth. The way I'm going to do it, I'm going to say, I can use a function. Why not? Function, statistical, average. Of course, there are many ways of doing things. I'm just going to show you 3 or 4 ways and you choose your own way. Average of what? DATA. It's not case sensitive, it knows. And I can use the function max, or can say equal max of data. And I don't close parentheses. And if I didn't convince you that using a name is good, then please select the 500 numbers and do it yourself. I can use the auto sum for getting the sum. I'm going to use the lowest, which is min. By the way, there is a much easier way of doing things. Mode. Median. Maybe I'll use a function. Function, statistical, and then I hit M a few times until I see the median. If you touch any of them and just click M a few times until you see the median, and the median of what? DATA. And there are 2 different kinds of standard deviations. Nobody wants to be a statistician, but for you to know, there's a standard deviation of a population with a P and standard deviation of the sample with an S. So I'm going to go to function and look for the one that says STDP, not with the S. When you have more than 30 numbers, you always use the P. Otherwise, you use the S. If it's less than 30 numbers, DATA. So it was painful, but sometimes it pays to do it. There is a much easier way to do things. What I want you to do is see whether you have under the data analysis toolpack. Most people don't have it, so I'm going to show you how to activate it. And it's a tool that is good for people like me, lazy. You go to File, Options, and go to Add-ins. You should see the analysis toolpack, not the VBA. The analysis toolpack down here, mine is activated, it's up there. You say go, click on the analysis toolpack and say okay. This is a wonderful tool. It saves you a tremendous amount of time, and you don't have to be a statistician or know where all the functions are. All you have to do is go to data analysis, descriptive statistics. It's going to ask you where the data is, in case you forgot, DATA. And what do you want? You ask for the last four things. Data analysis, descriptive statistics. You see it knows already that the data is from A1 to A500. And you say, okay. And everything is here. Okay. So with 2 clicks, the data analysis is giving you all the information. Let me go back to the sheet called statistics and show you that we found out that the smallest number is equal to 61. The highest is 129. And what I want to know, by the way, I'm going to use all these functions one more time on a different sheet on data, but I'm not going to do it manually. I'm not going to do anything. Once you already worked so hard to create the average, the highest, the lowest, and all that, you can just replace it in a different sheet and you'll see how it works. Anyhow, now what I found out that the lowest number is 61, the highest number is 129, and what I want to know from the 500 numbers that I have there, how many of them are between 61 and 70, 70 and 70 and 80, 80 and 90, and so on and so forth. So what I did is I created these bins, 70, 80, all the way to 130. It has nothing to do with Excel. I didn't start with 60 because there's nothing below 61. I didn't go to 140 because there's nothing above 129. So that's why I use these bins, and I use the word bins because Excel is using bins. And I created the bins for my frequency distribution. So I can tell my people how many values are where. So this is an array function. An array function is a little bit different than all the functions we used before or we are using. You have to select all the cells you want to get the answer in. Select all the cells you want to get the answer in and start typing the function called frequency. Once you see it going, hit the tab. It says, give me the data array. It doesn't say data, it says data array. That means it's an array function. An array function is when we have to do or go an extra step. Where's the data? DATA. I name it because I don't want to select it. Bins array, we just created, or I created the bins. I'm going to select the bins. Don't say okay because it doesn't work. I don't close parentheses. It's not important. You can close the parentheses. Because it's an array function, you have to use Control-Shift-Enter, not Enter. So I'm going to use Control-Shift, hold it down, and hit Enter. And now I get that 30 values are between 61 and 70, 11 values are between 70 and 80, and so on and so forth. If you notice at the formula bar, it has curled brackets. This is an array function. It's not a conventional function. So if you just did it for the 70 and dragged it down, it wouldn't work. And also because it has curly brackets there, you're not going to be able to change it. If you attempt to change it, Excel is not going to let you do it. Okay. So what you want to do now is just use a name here. Let me call it F for frequency. If you notice, this one doesn't have a header. So if I hit F11, I get my frequency chart where the 70, 80, 90 are at the bottom. Okay. And the only thing I have left, maybe because it's continuous data, is right-click format and remove the gap. I didn't do it. Let me do it again. Maybe I'll type 0. Okay, let me go back to the sheet called statistics and do it one more time because I think the statistics are not fine enough. So I'm going to create another set of bins. This time I'm going to do 65, 70, select the 2 of them, and drag it all the way down to the highest possible number, which is 130. It doesn't make sense to go over 130 because 129 is my highest value. Select all the cells you want to get the answer in. Select all the cells you want to get the answer in. And use the frequency function, equal frequency. Where's the data? DATA. I don't have to select it. Where are the bins? Here are the bins. And don't forget, Control Shift Enter. And now I'm going to use some kind of a header here and hit my F11 to get an instant chart on a new sheet and remove the gap. I know it's painful and I'm going to show you an easier way, but I show it because some people need to do it this way. And why do I say the word need? Because what I'm going to do next, which is easier, is not going to be linked to the original data. In this case, if I change anything here, let's say I make it 5,000, you'll notice that the average changes. But if you're going to do what I do next, it's not linked to the original data. So anything that I'm going with the data analysis tool pack is a one-time deal. And then when you change the data, it doesn't reflect. So what you want to do is you want to do it the long way, the way I did it. So I'm going to go again to my data analysis. And now instead of using the descriptive statistics, I think in the future, we are going to have a workshop where I cover all the features of the data analysis toolpack. Some of them are fabulous, but today we are just covering the two simple ones, which is we don't have to be statisticians, but we can get all the stuff that all these sophisticated statisticians are. I'm going to use the histogram. It's going to ask me where the data is, DATA. Unless you want to select A1 to A500. The bins, I'm going to use these bins. No control shift, no anything, just click on the chart output and say okay. And you're going to get the same thing. The rest of it is just cosmetics. You can use the little one. So the analysis toolpack, which we are going to have a whole workshop by itself to do things with it in the future, is very simple. You just click twice or 2 clicks and you get the same stuff you do the long way. Let me add one more thing. I worked so hard on the sheet called statistics and I created the average, the highest, the lowest and all that. And then my boss gives me another set of data here called household income. And the data there, if you're going to check, I named it income, is from cell A2 to A1001. I have 1,000 values there. If I click on it, it's going to select it. And basically what I want to do is the same thing, get the average of income, the highest of income, the lowest of income, and so on. But I don't want to do it the long way. So I'm going to go back to the stuff I did here, select it, copy it, and paste it here. Yeah, it's a little bit, it's still using, let me decrease the size. It's still using the average of data, the average of the max of data, and so on and so forth. And I want them to use the income. So I'm going to select all these values and I'm going to use a shortcut, Control H. Control H is replace. Replace what? Capital DATA. Here the capital and lowercase are very important. With what? Income. So please replace every time you see the word data with the word income, say replace all. And you don't have to start from scratch. It does it all for you. Okay. Any questions before I go to the next thing? Okay. I am going to a new topic called regression. And after we finish this 2-3 more sheets here, we're going to take a 10 minutes break, and then we'll do something completely different. So I'm on the sheet called regression, and basically what I want to do is I want to find the relationship between X and Y. And right now it's not important, but later on you'll see that if you know these things are very important. So I'm going to go to insert, and I'm going to use a scatter chart. If you notice, the values are all on a straight line. This is because I chose the data and made it look good. It's all on a straight line. And I want to know the relationship between month and sales. I can do all kinds of things, but as a person who doesn't like statistics and I just need to explain the relationship, all I do is right click here, say add trend line, and ask for the last two things. Close that. Basically, it gave me the equation of the straight line, something we learned in first year of high school, I think. And it says theoretically that y equals, it's reversed, minus 4.3 plus 4.7x. Theoretically, every month our sales are going up by 4.87 units, dollars, rupees, whatever you want. R square is close to 1. In real life, it's very difficult to get anything close to 1. It's close to 1 here because I chose the data. If it's 0, that means there's no relationship. If it's 1, it's a perfect relationship. You can use it to forecast. Basically, it's called the coefficient of determination. I'm not teaching you statistics, just how to use Excel. And it's the correlation square. Now, I can get all these things also manually. I'll show it to you once. So I can call these values X, these values Y, and then I can use the Excel functions to do the same thing. I'm just going to show you one of them. I don't want to show you all of them. Let's say the slope. What are the known Y's? I just click Y instead of selecting it. What are the known X's? I just hit X instead of selecting it. And it gives me the same value that you see on the chart. So the slope, and you see, because I named it, I don't have to select it. And the last thing I'm going to do here is I am going to use this data to forecast the future. I am going to leave here months 13, 14, 15, 16 empty. And I'm going to use here 13, 14, 15, 16. There is a reason why I want to do it manually first, and then show you something that is going to help you if you have to forecast. So I can use a function called forecast that is going to forecast months 13, 14, 15, 16 based on the data above. I can use forecast. It's going to say, what do you want to forecast for? X, comma. What are the known Y's? Here they are. What are the known X's? Here they are. You see why I named ranges, because I don't have to select it painfully every time. And then if you double click, you're going to forecast month 13, 14, 15, 16. Why did I leave the range here empty is because I don't know if you recall when I said in the very first minute of my session about an hour ago, that if you have 3, 6, if you remember, we had these two values, and you drag it down for the autofill, Excel is performing a linear regression. If you recall it, then I say to myself, if Excel is using linear regression, why do I have to use all these painful calculations? If I have sequential data, just select the data here and just drag it down. Use the autofill, which is using or creating regressions. And if you notice, I didn't do anything. All I did is the autofill, and I don't have to go through naming, through functions, through anything, and Excel is going to get identical values. So just remember, if you have sequential data that looks good, just drag it down and the autofill is going to be a good thing for you to do. Let me show you two more things on that sheet, on that workbook, and then we're going to go to something completely different, unrelated. So here I have household income and purchases. If somebody wants to know the relationship between household income and how much they buy in our company, I'm going to go and insert the chart. And I see that it's positively correlated. And what I want to know is I want to know the relationship between household income and purchases. Right click on any of the blue guys, add trend line, and ask for the last two things. So ask where is not so good. What does it mean? It means, for if you're not a statistician and you don't want to be one, that you can explain 72% of the relationship to household income, and 28% is because of something else. I don't know what, where they live, and so on and so forth. But basically, it says that every additional dollar they make, they spend with us $0.0048, and so on the average. That's what it means, and I'm not going to deal with it now. We're going to have a whole session in the future of forecasting, and then I'll discuss it, and you'll be able to become pretty efficient and almost an expert in no time. Since we learned how to do these things, I want to show you how to find all kinds of functions, because it's so simple. We have supply and demand. And going back to your economics class, you want to know what is the supply curve, the demand curve, the function. It's very simple. If you know Excel, just click and create an XY chart, insert. I'm going to use this one. Basically, it is showing me the line for 8,000 and 9,000, and you want the actual to know the line for the demand and supply. So right click. I did it in this way so that you know, in case you have the wrong thing, what to do. In the say select data and switch the X and the Y. So now we have the supply and demand. If you want to know what is, this is a straight line, so it's not a big deal. What is the supply curve function? Right click, add trend line, and ask for the last two things. It's going to be 1 because it's a straight line. The R square is 1. So this is the function for the supply line. And I also have the function for the demand line. Right click, add trend line, and ask for the last two things. So it's pretty simple. Once you understand how it's done, you don't have to do all kinds of things to get the function. So, and you see, because it's a straight line, R square is going to be 1. There's nothing else. And the last example I have, it's when it's not linear. And when it's not linear, it's a little bit tricky, but you'll see that it's very simple. So I have the price, demand, supply, and I'm going to insert a chart. So I have the supply curve and the demand curve. What is the supply curve function? Very simple. Excel is going to do it with me, for me in the chart. Right click, add trend line, ask for the last two things, and you'll discover that R square is not equal to 1 because it's a curved line. And basically, the trend is a straight line. So what you can do is play with any of these things, see if it's logarithmic. No. Polynomial. You get an R square of 1, except the function is too complicated, maybe power. So now you see that you got a perfect match to your supply curve, and the function is y equals 60x squared. And I don't think all of you are going to use all the things I'm covering, but in case you have to do things, It's so simple that you know where it is. So I'm going to right click here, add trend line, ask for the last two things and find which function is best to get the R square. Maybe power, maybe polynomial, maybe linear, I don't know, exponential maybe. Okay, we got one. Any questions? Okay, I am going to, now it's, I'm going to take a 10 minutes break, and then when we come back, we're going to come to part 4, which is more heavy duty than the statistics. Any questions before I take a break? When I teach in other places in the United States and I don't get questions, I get worried, but I guess people are more shy. Okay, 10 minutes break and I'll come back. Okay, I'm back. I opened the workbook part 4. You see, it's easy to follow 1, 2, 3, 4. And now what we are going to do is do something completely different than what we did before. Part 4 is what if analysis. So I have here a loan of $30,000, let's say. Number of years is 5, interest rate is 5%, and this is the monthly payment we're going to calculate. It's not on how to calculate the monthly payment. It's more how to use Excel for what if analysis. So I'm going to select these 2 columns, and I'm going to go to formulas, create from selection. So now it names the cells in column B by the names you see in column A. So this will be loan, this will be number of years, this will be interest rate, and this is going to be the monthly payment. And that's the only function I'm going to calculate, which is the monthly payment. Sorry, I'm going to make it a little bit larger. I'm going to go function, financial, and under the letter P, I'm going to find payment. Anytime you use an Excel function, it says exactly what it expects you to do, calculates the payment for loan based on constant payment and constant interest rate. When you say, okay, it's going to give you a lot of things. It's going to ask you for the rate, and it says rate is the interest rate per period. For example, 6% divided by 4 for quarterly. So I'm going to click on the rate, and because it's monthly, I'm going to divide it by 12. Anything that has bold letters is mandatory. The other ones are optional. Number of periods, I'm going to click on the number of years times 12. I could have typed 60, but then it wouldn't do what I wanted to do. And the present value of the loan, I'm going to say minus the loan, not anything else, because I'm getting a loan, not giving a loan. And I see already that for the next 5 years, every month, I'm going to pay $545.75. These 2 things are optional because it's not bold. Future value, if you have some kind of a balloon loan and you pay something at the last month, you put it here. Type by default is 0. You pay at the end of the month. Otherwise, you put a 1 if you pay at the beginning. Anyhow, for the next month, for the next 5 years, we are going to pay $545.75 a month. So I'm going to go and say, well, I have a problem. I can't pay 545. I can pay only 525. So I'm going to go to data, what if analysis, goal seek. We said 525. So let's see what I can do. Maybe I can have a lower loan, a shorter period loan. I'm going to say, okay, so if I want to pay $525 a month, then I have to take a loan of $28,859. Well, I do need the 30,000, so I'll try something else. I'm going to go what if analysis, goal seek, 525. And let's see, maybe I should pay it off in more than 5 years. So maybe if I pay it off in 5 years and 3 months, it will do the same thing. Or maybe I can talk to the bank and negotiate a better interest rate. What kind of an interest rate do I have to negotiate? Goal seek, 525, say interest rate. So if I can convince the banker to give me a 1.94 interest rate, I am in business again. So that's one part of the what if analysis, and I'll do it 3 times because this is important, especially if you have to do business plans or if you have to negotiate. It's a good tool. So I want to know what would happen to my monthly payment. I'm going to click and say equal monthly payment. If instead of 5 years, I want to pay it off in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years, and so on and so forth. So you see how I linked it to the original model. Select the two columns and ask yourself, what is changing down the column here? It's the number of years. I'm going to go to data. What if analysis data table? What is changing on the left is the number of years. And you see that it calculates for the different number of years. If you notice, let me just make the format better. If you noticed, the 5 years is the same as the original. And I can do the same thing for the interest rate, 1%, 1.5%, 2%. Let me just show you equal. Click on that. Excuse me. What is changing down the column is the interest rate. I'm going to go to data, what if analysis, data table. Nothing is changing along the row. What is changing down the column is the interest rate. And it's going to do for me the same thing. Okay. And for 3.5%, let me just use the same format. You get the same value as the original. And then this was a one-way table. Sometimes I want to have a two-way table. Okay. So here I have a two-way table where the interest rate is changing along the row and the number of years changing down the column. So I can do the same thing. The only thing is in the intersection, I use that. And then I select the range, Control A is select the range and ask myself, what is changing along the row? The interest rate. What is changing down the column? The number of years. I go to data. What if analysis data table? What is changing along the row is the interest rate. What is changing down the column is the number of years. And let me just format it and you'll see that it does for me the same thing as the other sheet. And for, I think, 3.5% and 5 years, I get the same thing. Okay, I am going to complicate it for a minute. So I'm going to go to the sheet called sensitivity analysis and do the same thing again. So I have here all these, I have a Jeep that I buy for $20,000. I'm going to calculate the loan, the rate, and so on and so forth. So the first thing I do is I select the range and name the cells on the left by the ones you see on the right. So I'm going to go to formulas, create from selection. So this is equal to price. This is equal to down payment. It says here, and I'm going to calculate the loan. So basically I'm doing the same thing I did on the first sheet, except I'm going to complicate it in a minute. And I'm going to calculate the payment. So I'm going to go to function, payment. If you have any questions, please stop me anytime. So what's the rate? I'm going to click on the rate, divide by 12. Same thing I did before. Number of periods, click on the years, times 12, and minus the loan. So for the next 5 years, I'm going to be paying $564.05. I'm not going to use the goal seek to show you all kinds of things. What I want to show you is if we have more than 2 parameters, then how do we work on it? So I'm going to calculate the total payments, which is equal to the payment times the years times 12 and calculate the total interest. Why am I using names here? First of all, to make it meaningful. And second, that if my boss asks me what's going on, I can always go to formulas, show formulas, and show him how I calculated all these things. And I can also move it to PowerPoint. Now what I want to do is I want to create my sensitivity analysis tables. So I want to know what would happen to my payment if instead of 8%, I'm going to have 3%, 4%, 5%, and so on. I'm going to say equal payment equal total payments equal total interest. What would happen to these values? You notice that I already marked it in yellow that I expect it to be the same as the original. I'm going to select the table and say data, what if analysis, data table. What is changing along the row? Nothing. What is changing down the column is the interest rate. And you see how it calculates for me all the values. For 8 years, I get the same. Now, because I have names, I can just copy this and say copy and paste here. And you notice this is going to be linking to the original data. What would happen to my values, payment, total interest, if instead of 5 years, or instead of 3 years, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What if analysis, data table, what is changing down the column is the number of years, and it doesn't. I'm almost ready to show you what happens if I need more than 2 parameters. Here I have equal, and I'm going to click on the payment, and I want to know what would happen to my payment if instead of 3 years and 8%, I have 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, all the way to 10 years, with 10% here. And I'm going to say data table. What is changing along the row? What is changing down the column? Okay. Now I want to know what would happen if instead of $20,000, I have 10,000, 11,000, 12,000, 13,000, 40,000. If instead of 8%, I have 3%, 4%, if I have it, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the developer. If you don't have the developer, which most people don't, go to File, Options, Customize Ribbons. And ask for the developer here. And then you'll have the developer. The developer is usually used by people who create macros, but because we are not dealing with macros, we are dealing with something else. I am going to click under the insert and use one of the 2 icons on the first 2 rows here, not the macros, but for the forms. This was used by Excel to create forms. I'm going to use the one that is the scroll bar. Now, if you use a scroll bar, you have to be careful because if you use it, just click on it, it creates a gigantic form, a scroll bar. Just use it, be gentle with it. Click on it, and then you can create a scroll bar. I'm going to create a scroll bar next to the number of years. And I'm going to use the scroll bar to control the number of years. How do I do it? I'm going to right click. Doesn't let me. Okay, format control. What is the current value of the years? I'm going to put 3. And I'm going to go from 1 to 10. Okay? And let's not worry about the rest of the stuff here. I'm going to click on the number of years. And then you'll see that I have a way to control the number of years using the scroll bar. Click out of it. And you see that you can go 3 years and so on and so forth. It's a very nice of presenting things. And let me show you one more. I'm going to use one for the price of the Jeep, 10,000, 11,000, 12,000, 14,000. I'm going to insert a scroll bar. And if I talk to management, I can make my presentation. What is the current value of the Jeep? It's 20,000. And I want to go from 10,000 to 30,000 with increments of 1,000. By the way, that I'm going to show you also the page change. Let's make it maybe 3,000, then I'll explain. And what do I want to change? I want to change the price. So I'm going to have 10,000, 11,000, 30,000, all the way to 30,000. And of course, it's not so simple always to use. If it goes above 30,000, Excel doesn't know how to handle it. I'll show you later. And then you can say, okay, if it's going to be 21,000 for, let's say, 3 years. And then I say that the page change was 3,000. So if you click on the gray area here, it's going to go 3,000, 3,000. So you can have 4, 5, 6 dimensions instead of the 2 dimensions that a data table is given to you. So if you use a scroll bar, it's a nice thing to impress your audience and to also create more than 2 parameters. And also, not that I want to show you now, you can also animate the charts. If you have a break-even point chart, it's going to change it. Okay, let's do one more example and then go to something completely different. When we do in the future the analytic techniques for decision making, I'm going to repeat all this stuff one more time. But right now, it's just like an introduction so that you know what we can do. And I have another example. The last example is I have a small little business plan. I named already the cells. This is called unit sold. This is called price per unit. And this is the total revenue. It says unit sold times price per unit. Why do I have names? First of all, so I know what's going on and you know what's going on. And also, if somebody wants to know what I did, they can look at the formulas and understand. So let me just repeat everything we said here. We have revenue of $1 million. We have fixed costs of $890,000. We have variable cost of about $250,000. And if you notice, our costs are higher than our revenues, and that's why we are losing $140,000. So if somebody asks me, hey, how many units do we have to sell in order to break even? Of course, accountants know how to do it, but I can use data, what if analysis, goal seek, and say break even is 0. How many units do I have to sell in order to break even? So if I sell 59,333 units, I am in business. Or if they come to me and they say, well, we want to make $5 million profit. How many units do I have to sell in order to make $5 million? I'm going to put 5 million and say, if you want to sell $5 million, you have to sell 392,667 units. So basically, the goal seek is going to help you make the decision this way. And then we also have the what if analysis for the break-even point analysis. We had already 59,333 units. What I want to know is what would happen to my revenue. See, equal total revenue. My expenses, this is how I linked it. In my income, if instead of 50,000, we have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to select a range and say, what if analysis, data table, nothing is changing along the row. What is changing down the column is the number of units. And oops, I made a mistake, hold it. I did make a mistake. I clicked on the wrong thing, I can tell. So I'm going to say data, what if analysis, data table, and what do you want to change is this one. And you see where the break-even point chart is. I am going to cover more of that in one of the next sessions, but just now we did that. And before we go to the next part, any questions about it? Any questions? Okay, I am going to go to something completely different. Let me just open something else. I'm almost ready. Okay, I opened a completely empty workbook. And what I want to show you is how to go the third dimension, how to add a few sheets together. So I have one sheet, just a blank new sheet. So I'm going to add 4 more sheets. And I'm going to call the first one week 1. The second one, week 2. The next one, week 3. The next one, week 4. And the last one, total. What do I want to do? I want to create a work payroll for 4 months, for 4 weeks, and then add it to the total. And then I have 2 or 3 more examples. This is good for anybody who does accounting and he doesn't want to have everything on the same sheet. What I want to do is I want to select all sheets. So I'm going to click on any of the sheets, say right click, and say select all sheets. Basically, you see up here next to the ceiling, it says group. What I'm going to do is happening on all 5 sheets together. So I'm going to put here name. And because I'm not so good in typing, I'm just going to say A, B, C, D. And then I'm going to say rate. And let them get paid maybe 3, 4, 5, 6. And the hours worked, I don't know yet, so I'm going to select all these sheets, all these cells, hit 0, Control Enter. Control Enter enters the same information on all the cells. Basically, I entered now 20 zeros because it does it on all 5 sheets. And then I'm going to calculate the salary or whatever it is, salary. I'm going to calculate it all together. I'm going to say equal this. You see, I selected all of them, times that, and then I'm going to say Control Enter. Control Enter calculates all of them. And the only thing left is double click for the auto sum. So now I have 5 sheets. They're all identical because I made them all identical. And then I'm going to right click and say ungroup sheets. So if you go to week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, they're all identical. If I group them, they work together. So I'm going to go to week 1 and let my people work. And go to week 2, maybe everybody worked 25 hours. Week 3, I'm going to put some different hours. And week 4, everybody works 40 hours. What is the purpose of the exercise? The purpose of the exercise is to show you that I can sum week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4 into my totals. So basically what I want to do is I want to sum C2 from week 1, 2, 3, and 4, going the third dimension. I'm going through the sheets instead of going through rows or columns. So what am I going to do? I'm going to click on the sum. And it's going to ask me sum from where? Click on week 1. See, it says in the formula bar, I'm going to sum for you from the sheet. You see exclamation? named week 1. To where? I'm going to hold the shift down and click on week 4. So it says I'm going to sum for you everything from week 1 to week 4. Which cell do you want to sum? This one. So you see I'm going to sum C2 for week 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to hit Control Enter because I don't like to hit Enter. And then I'm going to drag it down or double click. And I summed the 4 sheets. I had a project one where I had like 100 different students taking the executive MBA program, and each one of them paid on a different date. So I had 100 sheets or so for all the students, and then I was able to sum through and get a cash flow for all the payments for the entire program. Okay, so let me open for you 2 of the examples that I sent you. I am going to stop sharing this one and take up part 5, 3DA. Part 5, 3DA. You have part 5, 3DA. Basically, this was created on 5 sheets, and you'll see there are a couple of extra stuff things that I want to show there. So I have the inventory in Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles. You notice that all the sheets are identical because otherwise I can't sum through them. New York. And what I want to do is I want to sum my inventory for the 5 other sheets. And then I'll show you that it's more sophisticated than that. So basically what I want to do is I want to sum the cell B5 for Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Boston, and New York. The way I'm going to do it, I'm going to click on the sum. And it's going to ask me sum from where. I'm going to click on Chicago. Shift, click on New York. So look at the formula bar. It's going to sum for me everything from Chicago through New York. Which cell do I want to sum? This one. So now it's going to sum for me the 5 sheets from New York, from Chicago through New York. I'm going to hit Control Enter. And then when I drag it out gently, I don't want to kill the sum, the total. I summed all the sheets. So now if somebody comes to me, excuse me, what happens if Boston is not in the picture? I don't have to delete Boston. All I have to do is take Boston and maybe move it to the right. Right now, you look at the sum, it includes Boston, which is $36,000. Okay? Or let's say the total value is $117,000. If I'm going to take Boston, which has 62,000, I'm going to move it to the right of company. And you'll see that it subtracted it. And then I can move it back. And then look at the company, it's there. Any questions? This is very useful. I found out that any bookkeepers, accountants like that feature because then they don't have to change too many things and they don't make mistakes if they have many sheets for different months and so on and so forth. Any questions? No questions. Let me show you one more example and then we'll move to something completely different. So let me just stop sharing this one and show you one more example of summing up part 5, 3DB. And what do I have here? I have the payroll for first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. You notice that all of them are identical. Fifth quarter, fourth quarter, and then I can just sum it. And what I want to do is I want to sum the number of hours for quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to do the same thing we did before. I'm going to sum. Sum from where? Quarter 1. Sum to where? Shift, quarter 4. Sum what? This cell. So now if you hit OK or enter, it summed it. I'm going to gently drag it down, stop, drag it to the right. And I summed all the 4 sheets into my own annual. Any questions before I go to something completely different? No questions. I'm not surprised because you guys don't ask questions. It's okay. I'm going to open part 5, plain vanilla 5. Let me just do some things here. Hold on. I'm going to open part 5 in a second. Okay, I opened the workbook part 5. And what I want to do here is I want to give the students a grade, first of all, a letter grade, then an actual grade based on the table that I see here. And because I don't like to use absolute addressing, what I did is I selected the table here and I typed the word table, T-A-B-L-E, hit enter. And then I am going to look up the 84 that the first person in row 2 has and give him a grade of B, I guess. And the next person is going to get a C and so on and so forth. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a function called VLOOKUP because my table is vertical. So actually the letter grade is in the second column of the table and the grade is in the third column of the table. So I'm going to use 2 for here and 3 for that. So I'm going to use a function called VLOOKUP. I'm going to go to function, look up a reference. And the very last one here is VLOOKUP. And it's going to say, what is the value you want to look up? I'm going to say this one. Where in the table I name, by the way, if you hit the F3 button, all the names in the workbook come up. So I'm going to say table. And where's the answer? In the first column, second column, third column, it's in the second column. Okay, here. I'm going to say okay, and double click, and everybody got the grade. If I want to get the actual grade, I'm going to go to function, look up a reference VLOOKUP. What am I looking up? The same old value. Where? In the same old table. And this time the answer is coming from the third column of the table, this one. I'm going to say okay. And everybody gets their grades. You notice that 84 is not in the table and we get a grade. 81 is not in the table, we get a grade. 68 is not in the table. Basically, it's using a range lookup. It looks up the range to get the answer. Okay, let's go to exercise. And this time, what I want to show you is when a value like in row 7, in row 10, which has the 7 here, is not in the table, and it still is going to give us a value which we don't want. We want an exact match. So let me do it the long way first and say function VLOOKUP. Looking up, I forgot the name, so let me just name it first. Sorry. Let me just name this range by a name. I'm going to call it tools. Otherwise, I have to use absolute addressing. And I'm going to go to function, Lookup and reference, V lookup. Okay. What are you looking up? This value. Where? In the table we called tools. And the answer is in the second column of the table. And if you double click, you're going to get all the names. The only thing is screwdriver does not belong to 650. It gave me the wrong answer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here and go to the function again. And this time I'm going to use the option. Do you want to have a range lookup? And the answer is no. Well, we don't type no in Excel, we type false. But we don't have to type false if we put 0 and it puts false. So do you want to have a range lookup? And the answer is false. And then if you double click or drag it down, not available. So the difference between a regular VLOOKUP and an exact match is if you have a 0 or false at the end. Okay, one more example. And this time I have the social security number, which is the ID in the United States, and we want to get the salary and the last name. The way I'm going to do it, and I'm sure that by now everybody is following me, it's not a big deal, is I'm going to name the table, I'm going to call it salary. Enter. And I'm going to get the salary from row, from the fifth column, from the fourth column of the table, and the salary from the fourth column of the table, and last name from the third column of the table. So I'm going to do the same thing, function, lookup and reference, VLOOKUP. What are you looking up? The ID, where in the table you just named salary. The answer is in the fourth column. And no, you don't want to have a range lookup. You want to have an exact match. And if you double click, everybody got the salary. And the same thing you say about the last name. I'm going to say function, lookup a reference, VLOOKUP. I'm looking up this one. In the table we named salary. The answer is in the third column this time, and 0. And then double click, and you get it. I don't even ask if you have questions because I repeated that VLOOKUP 6, 7 times. I'm sure that you have it. If anybody has any questions, remember my name is Isaac Gottlieb. You just send me an email to isaacgottlieb@gmail.com. I always answer any Excel questions. I don't charge anything. And if you want to join my monthly newsletter, I send a newsletter to anybody. You don't have to send your name, just the email address. Okay, we are going to move to part 6. Why don't I take a 5 minutes break? I'll have a sip of water and I'll come back in 5 minutes, and then we're going to go with part 6, which is not related to anything we did. So 5 minutes and I'm back. Okay, I'm back. And I opened part 6 under the sheet database. I just have to share with you something that I shared with somebody else. It's interesting. When I teach in the United States or in Europe, people don't stop asking questions. When I was teaching physically in India or in Japan or in China or in Singapore, people don't ask questions. I think it's a cultural thing. Here, they don't stop asking questions. Okay, I'm on the sheet called database. Database by definition in Excel is when you have no missing rows, no missing columns. You may have a missing cell here and there, and all unique headers. I have here in in column B, sequential numbers 101, 102, 103, 104. If I didn't have it, I would create an extra column and call it maybe index, and I'll explain to you why. To have sequential numbers, and you'll understand later why I need it. But because column B has sequential numbers, I don't need it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to sort the entire database here by age. I'm going to click on any of the ages and click on A to Z under data, A to Z, and the entire database is sorted by age. I can sort by seniority. I can also sort descending, and so on and so forth. Sometimes I want to sort by more than one parameter. For example, gender. Within the gender, you want to sort by age. Sometimes last name within last name, first name within first name, age, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go to the sort menu and say, first of all, sort it for me by gender, A to Z maybe. Add the level and sort by age within the gender. When you say okay, you're going to see females 22 to 45, males 25 to 48. And you can sort a few levels. I never sorted by more than 3. Now you sort and sort and sort, and then, oh, I want to bring it back to the original order. This is my index. Sort it A to Z, and you're back to where you were in the very beginning. So that's why I like to have an index, so that I can always bring it back to the original order. One thing that many people know how to do, but I just want to show you, is click on the filter, and then you can talk to all the males from department 3. So the filter is pretty simple. Next, what I want to do is I want to know what is the average age of females and the average age of males, for example. So I'm going to sort the entire database by gender. See females followed by males, and then I'm going to go to data, subtotal. Every time you see a change in the gender, you want the average of the age. You can also add seniority. So you see, I sorted it by gender, and then I can ask for any one of these functions. And I can say seniority, age, or anything else. When you say okay, it's going to show me that. The only nice thing about subtotals, it has like grouping features here. You can click on 3, you can click on 2, you can click on 1. Most of the time you want 2. The problem with this is that basically it hid many of the rows, like 2, 3, 4 through 9 are not here. And sometimes when you use the subtotal and you want to copy and paste it somewhere else, you're surprised. I'll show you what happens when you copy and paste it somewhere else. It shows everything up, everything that is hidden as well. So what you want to do is you want to select only the visible cells. Even when you filter, you want to select only the visible cells. So you select it and use Control G for go to, Control G. And under special, you say visible cells only. Select visible cells only, and you say OK, and Control C for copy and paste. It will just copy and paste the visible cells. Okay, one more example. I'm going to go to data, subtotals, remove all. And now what I want to know is I want to know the age of the oldest carpenter, oldest electrician, oldest machinist. I'm going to sort it A to Z. And now I'm going to use the subtotal one more time. At each change of what did we sort it by job, you want to get the oldest, we say max, and then let's say seniority and age, and click on 2, and you're in business. I'll come back to this sheet in a minute. What I want you to open, if you have a chance, or watch what I'm doing, I'm going to stop sharing this one and share another sheet with you, another workbook. The workbook that I called grouping. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, just go through the sheet called data to show you how to use the grouping. I think this is good for any people who use a lot of data. So basically, this is group to the right. This is group for the quarter, and then you have sum of the quarters. So if you selected data or created 2, 3, 4 levels, and there's too much information and you want to make a presentation, since you already saw the grouping, you can go to data, and under the drop-down menu for the outline, auto outline, make it auto outline, and then you can just say 1 or 2, 3, 2, 1, 1. Play with the auto outline. It could be a nice thing to show presentations, and then you can ungroup, clear outline. Okay, I am going to go back to part 6. In part 6, I have a sheet called pivot. I know it's getting late for you, and we covered so many things. We are going to cover the next time, if you join us, more about pivot tables. I'm just going to do some introduction of pivot tables. And I think we had a lot for one time. Also, because you don't ask questions, I cover a lot more material, which is also good. So I'm on the sheet called pivot, and I'm going to create a pivot table. I'm going to go to insert, pivot table. Follow me, even if you use pivot tables before. From time to time, I can show you things that I learned from other people and can help you. By the way, many of the things that I do is when I teach, people make comments, and then I learn from them as well. So I have a database from A2 to D74. I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to get a pivot table. And what I want to do is I want to change it to a classic view, because it's better to use the classic view. And I have my own opinion about the new one, but I'm not going to voice it now. So I'm going to right click, pivot table options, display, classic. So the pivot table has four parts: data, parameter, and filter. So I'm going to take the product and put it on the left. And if you want, you can drag it down here too. It doesn't make any difference. And I'm going to put the revenue in the middle, either here or here. By the way, if you use pivot tables a lot and you use the classic, watch what happens to the trailing icon. It changes colors according to where it is, so you don't make a mistake. See how the blue is changing where it is? So it allows you to put the data at the right place without making a mistake. So in case you don't know, French coffee around here sells the most. And then I'm going to see if it makes a difference which region it is. I'm going to put the region here. Difficult to tell, but French coffee sells best in any of the regions. What I'm going to do here is either double click or right click, double click on the sum and go to show value as and say percent of column. And you notice that now it's much easier to see that French coffee sells best. I'm going to change it back. I could have done Control Z, but I just want to show you no calculations. And now I'm going to take the region, put it to the right of the word product, different view. Region to the left of the word product, different view. And product up here. What did I do? I just pivoted the table. This is why it's called a pivot table. Now I'm going to take the month and put it next to the ceiling. And I can filter and do the analysis only for January. Or do multiple months, January and April. The problem with multiple items, as you see now in B2, is you really don't know what I'm filtering. So starting with Excel 2013, there was a change. I'm going to take it off and pull it out. So if you want to have a visible filter, what you do is you click here and you say Insert Slicer. Slicer is a visible filter. Click on month, and then you can do January and April, or hold the control down and do both. And then you have a visible filter. So the slicer is a visible filter. Okay, I am going to go to a workbook called Pivot Table Examples. So I'm going to close this one. And I'll show you two examples here, and then we'll go to something different. I have here months, sales, regions, flavor, cases sold, ice cream, vanilla, chocolate, strawberry. I'm going to create a pivot table to find out which flavor sells best. Insert pivot table. Make it classic, right click, pivot table, display, classic. Take the flavor, put it on the left. Take the cases sold, put it in the middle. And in case you didn't know, vanilla sells best. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to move the flavor here and maybe put the month on the left. So I can see that summer month sell best. Actually, what I'm going to do is sort it Z to A. So you see that August, July, June sells the best. If I have to make all kinds of analysis, I'll take the region, put it next to the ceiling for a filter, take the sales rep, put it next to the ceiling for a filter, and then I can maybe talk to Mr. Baker about his sales in the north. And I can also filter here and say, okay, let's just say vanilla. So you can see I can do all kinds of things with the pivot table. Now it's only a warm up. The next time we join and do data mining, maybe I'll do a few more things. And I'll show you one more example where people have a problem with, I'm going to visitors and do one more pivot table there. So I have regions, stores, days of the week, and visitors, and I'm going to insert a pivot table. Pivot tables are very simple. If you make a mistake, you just drag and move something else. But then when we have to do complicated stuff, I'll show you next time if you meet us, what we can do. So I have a pivot table, and as usual, I make it into classic, which is much easier to understand, especially for beginners. And I'm going to take maybe the day of the week and the visitors. And if you look at it, you see that Saturday is best day for business. And maybe also take the region and put it here. And sometimes Sunday, sometimes Saturday, depending on the region. Okay, next, I'm going to take the day out and put the region on the left. And I'm going to put stores on top here. So what do I see? I see different information. Sometimes I want to get a better view. So I'm going to take the store and put it to the left of the word region. And when you see something like that, you know that something is wrong. Every line has a different sum. So when you see something like that, you know that the stores belong to the region and not the other way around. So when you see a change on every line, that means we made a mistake, a logical mistake. Take the store, put to the right of the word region. So now you see that the regions belong to, I'm sorry, the stores belong to the region, and it's a much better way of doing things. Okay, that's one thing I wanted to show that people don't understand sometimes, and I wanted to show you when one thing belongs to the other, where the problem is. And now I'm going to show you the last example. I think we had enough for one time, and then I'm going to talk about something else. So I'm going to stop sharing this one, and I'm going to open. Yes.
Doc, if you can just have a look at the Q&A box, there are a couple of questions you may like to address.
I see only the question and answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I see the one that about the 10% tax. Is that the question? I don't see anything else that is of, okay, let me just look at this. You know what, let me come back to the questions in a couple of minutes. And
yeah, sure, okay.
What to do if we need particular data from subtle sheet on a separate sheet to use, okay. Okay, let me come back to the questions in a few minutes. Let me just finish that, and then I'll cover the questions, please. Okay. Okay, I have here data. I shortened it, and I wanted to show you that because as accountants, you want to make presentations sometimes, and the pivot table is not everything that can help you. So I have here, this is a student that came to class in China, and she had like a few thousand, I don't remember, about 2,100 invoices. And she wanted to present it right to management. So I'm going to create a pivot table. I'm going to go to Insert, Pivot Table. And I am going to say, okay, change it to Classic. We will have a whole new session of a lot one of the next meetings on pivot tables. So basically what I want to show you is over the 2-3 years, she sold about $1.2 million. Which countries did she sell it to? And this is what it is. Now, what happens is sometimes you want to make a presentation, and when you make a presentation, you make a chart of the pivot table. So I'm going to use Alt F1, and I'm going to get a chart. And it's really not what you should see. Basically, when you see a chart like that, when you use a pivot table or use any other accounting or economics data has nothing to do with Excel. It has to do with the presentation. What you want to do is you want to sort the data from the large to the small as a descending order. So descending, and then you get what is called the Pareto chart. So remember, when you have any presentation, regardless whether it's pivot tables or anything else, this is when you look at the Wall Street Journal or any other economics books, they sort it from the largest to the smallest. And this is why I wanted to show you. And the last thing I'm going to do, and then I'm going to start answering questions, is I am going to move out the country and put in the ship date. And what do you get? Spaghetti. So this is a problem that people don't know how to handle. If you have a lot of data like the ship date or thousands of customers or income, and it looks like that, the solution is very simple. Right click and go to group. And then you can group it by quarters, years, and month. And then the presentation is much easier. Okay, I'm going to go and try to answer the questions on the So the question I have here, I'm going to go from the last one, I think. Can we use the data for sensitivity analysis from many other sheets? The answer is yes. All you need on the sheet that you have is the sensitivity analysis, and it doesn't make any difference where you draw the information from. People want to know a brief about, somebody asked Amir about the, does it answer your question, Saif? So you can use the sensitivity analysis on a different sheet. Why do we use a classic view of a pivot table? Two reasons. Number one, and I had arguments with the Microsoft people. I was in Redmond, Washington a couple of times. It doesn't always calculate correctly. But from my point of view, I always use the classic because when I teach, it's much more intuitive to do things, and it's also easier to drag things out into the pivot table instead of using the thing on the right. So that's my preference, to use classic. Okay. So about Power Pivot. Oh, well, Power Pivot is a whole different things. We didn't even finish to do the power, and somebody earns already to be in Power Pivot. So it's a whole thing by itself. We can do some Power Pivot. We can do, when we share a sheet, having pre-lookup. If you have any questions, just send me an email, because sometimes it's difficult to answer for everybody else. I saw a question about the 10%, which is something. Let me open part one and explain how to do the absolute addressing, and then anybody else, let me just open part one, and then I want to share with you something completely different. So I'm back to part one, and I'll explain again the absolute addressing for people who didn't do it. I'm calculating the salary. Maybe I'll show you two ways of doing it. One is say equal this times that. You see it's relative addressing. It's going to be C3, D3, C4, D4, C5, D5. That's how I did it in the beginning. And if you're really lazy, which I didn't show you, you can calculate all of them at once, select all the cells you want to get the answer in, and say equal, click on this, times, click on that, and then use Control Enter. So what happened is C3, D3, C4, D4. Let me show you. This is the relative addressing, C3, D3, C4, D4, C10, D10. And the problem is if you stop doing it and you want to calculate the tax the same way, it's going to be equal the salary times the tax. And then when you drag it down, it's going to be E3, G1, E4, G2. G2 is empty. So what you want to do is you want always to go to the tax. Let me show you. It goes to G2, G3, G4, G5. And what you want always to go to G1. So what you say is equal this times that, and then you hit F4. F4 is anchoring it. So it's going to be $G, $1, E3, G1, E4, G1, E5, G1, E10, G1, absolute addressing. I hope this answers your question. Let me see what else is something that I can answer. Anyhow, everybody has my email. Please. Okay, so somebody's asking me about a chart. When you have a figure that is too right or too low and it's not visible, let me just see if I can answer it fast. Control N. Let me see if I can answer it fast. So they ask me if they have values that look like this. Let me show you that I know what people ask. And then we have other values that are. And if you try to create a chart, one set is not going to be visible. I think that's the question that they have. I don't know if I get this chart, if it's right. Hold on 1 second. Maybe that. I mean, I think what happened is maybe they use percentage. So what I would do is right click on this, guys. Hold on 1 second. This is going to answer your question, even though I have the wrong example. Right click here and say format data series, the one that is not visible, and use a secondary axis. And then what happens is one set of values works with the left axis and one set of values works with the right axis. I chose the wrong example, but this is basically answering the question of the person who says that some of the data is not visible. Right click on the visible data and change it to a secondary axis, and then it's going to be on two different scales, one on the right side, one on the left side. That was a fast question, but I think it helped. It answers your question. Okay, one more thing that I wanted to show with you. 1 second. What are we going to cover in the future? You can also send emails and ask what we want. The what if analysis you saw that we did today, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into it. I'm going to also cover Monte Carlo simulations. I have a budget and I'm not sure whether the data is right. Here it says the sales are 10, 10, 10, 10. Sometimes there is a frequency distribution. Some of the time we were selling 10, some of the time 11, some of the time 15. So you really cannot just make a budget and say, okay, the net present value is $12,455. So what you do is you run this budget 1,000 times with different data, with the distribution. It's called a Monte Carlo simulation using random numbers. And then at the end, you're going to get a frequency distribution or risk profile of your investment. And you say, oh, wow, 12% of the time I lost money if we ran it 1,000 times for 4,000 years. So this is one thing I'm going to cover. Statistics for non-statisticians, I have done some, but we have at least 6, 7 other things that I'm going to cover on that data analysis tool pack. What else did I promise? We're going to have financial modeling, which is going to be all the functions that Excel has for finance. Data mining, we started a little bit, but I'm going to show and go deeper into pivot tables. And then we're going to have a whole session of forecasting, because people know how to forecast using maybe moving average, but I'm going to go into multi-regression, cyclical data, and so on and so forth. And also we are going to use the solver. The solver is probably one of the most complicated things in Excel that people don't know how to use. And I think within a couple of hours, you will be pretty fluent. For example, if you have 15 investments and there's so many people available to run the projects and you have a certain amount of money, the solver is going to find for you the best optimal solution. The assignment problem, I have 5 employees with 5 regions. Where should I send whom to minimize my cost or to maximize sales if there are salespeople? Transportation problem, I'm going to also cover, for example, plant location. I have so many warehouses and I want to know where to put my plant to minimize my cost. Or if I have a city and I have 16 stores, where should I put my warehouse to minimize my cost to send to all these things? So this is part of what we are going to cover. Decision trees, part of Excel. And I think it's enough for one time, but basically I have a whole list that I sent to you people, and we are going to start creating these sessions for the future. Any questions? I guess no questions. You know my email address. You can always send it to me. And I think you're starting your Ramadan tomorrow, so the day after tomorrow. So we'll, after you finish the Ramadan, yes. Go ahead.
Right. Thank you very much, Isaac, for conducting an excellent and a detail-oriented session. We are sure that participants have benefited a great extent. Taking the opportunity, let me announce the exclusive fee for a 15-hour training session. For students, that will be 10,000. For members, 15,000, and for others, that will be 20,000. CBD committee of ICMAP Pakistan is thankful to all for your time, your active participation. Do stay in touch, get registered for this program, and contact ICMAP Pakistan and follow our official page for any queries, suggestions, and looking forward for other session. Jazakallah, stay blessed, stay tuned. Khuda Hafiz.